Hello, guys. So I was asked on the YouTube channel to make a little video on Vivid Fear. Just for us to say this, I don't run Wormwind, and she is an S2 player, so I'm going to be proposing some builds, but you might disagree with it, and it's really up to you. Now, the first thing is, if you're running her, it's usually that you're running Mono Thunder, and you're usually looking between her, a bunch of players. If you're comparing her to Efina, she is better in damage, and of course Kirill is also better, but she can be pretty decent. She's more oftenly used backline. Midline, she'll be completely useless as her technique stat is her weakest stat, so reflex-wise, she's never really going to be able to perform well. So out of the options, she only is really good in right back. Now, she does not currently have an extreme evolution, so that can be just a little bit frustrating. I don't have her, so I'm just going to say what the difference in skills are. Okay, let's just checking that. Yeah, so the difference in skills are not really that big. The only difference is this one's going to get a little bit bigger, critical rate, critical damage, and the second one's going to get better is Springing Fear, who's going to go up to 30 and 15%. So the first one is a regular penetrator. I want to point out that she's an attacker, so she's really damage-based. Aura of Bloodsucking is usually common to dark players, so it really feels like she was meant to be dark, and they just decided to throw her Wormwind. And Spreading Fear is actually pretty decent. They have reflex decrease and damage they receive is increased, but even if this is increased to 30 and 15, it still won't stop the current meta, and it's pretty bad. The only reason why this would be really good is if you're able to give her counter attack resistance, or if you already got on the line of Kirill. Harvest Fear, when penetrating, critical rate is increased and attack power is increased for every enemy penetrated. So even if they do a co-op defense, it's not going to hurt her that much. So stone-wise, just for the ace, it's pretty bad. You shouldn't really be using it unless you really want Wormwind and dark players, but I'm going to say wait for the E. It actually goes up to 25%. It's not that bad, but it really does feel like it's pushing itself. It's not one of the greatest. Now, on a Spirit Stone level, you have 3 options, so that's actually really nice. That means you can use 3 different uniques. I know there is recoloring, but I'm not going to talk about that because for her, with those 3 options, she's going to be able to get all the stones she wants. Now, which ones are the stones that people are going to advise for her? Actually, it is just the Dark and the Thunder uniques that are nice. So let's just go to the stone list, just pointing out Wormwind, Dark, Thunder. So my personal favorite for her would actually be to go in the dark section and go for Fontis Tissue Sample, because it's going to give her counterattack resistance, and if you do this, you're not actually going to need to worry yourself about giving her reflex. So if you don't give her reflex, you can give her counterattack, and that means the other slots can be based on damage, on survival, on spirit generation, or anything. So this is personally the unique I'm going to advise, but you can't even go wrong by throwing an Encompassing Soul, or by going in the Thunder and throwing a Shaking Heart of Thunder. Yeah, some of the new uniques are nice, but none of them really are going to give her that nice damage that is going to heal her in exchange. I know some people have talked about Earth's Cry because it decreases inflicted damage, but the thing is, she's going to be stolen upon, and it's usually not going to be that valuable knowing her position, so this is the one I would really not advise to get. So on a stone level, there's really only 2 ways to build her. You will either decide to go for a reflex, and if you're going for a reflex, you're gonna go, let's just check her stone slot again. You're gonna be going for 2 reflex stone. In the prime slot, you're gonna throw a red reflex, and you're gonna throw a Wormwind reflex. So right there, you've already got the stones. This is a reflex, this is a reflex. You're usually gonna put this as a crit damage to increase even more the heal and increase her damage. And you're gonna throw Shaking Heart of Thunder. This is a pretty decent build because this is actually gonna allow her to survive the reflex wars, but if in any way in front of her there's gonna be some sort of co-op defense with Elaine, it's really not gonna work, especially since now when she tries to penetrate Andor, she's going to have even less reflex. So this is the most common build currently, but I would not advise it just because with the newer mechanics, it's even harder for her to have reflex. So my personal opinion, and again, this is what I would do, is I would actually give her a Wormwind Speedstone or Wormwind Crit Stone. It depends your preference, what you want to generate. Here, I would put the Dark Fontus Tissue Sample. And in the Wormwind, it's really up to you. Anything that can actually damage. I would say a pen shot is actually really nice because of the action bar. Or you could put a crit either here because it's going to recover spirits. So basically, you'd be throwing something like the Crit Stone, you'd be throwing Fontus Tissue Sample, and you could be throwing this crit damage, making 2 stones that generate and that are actually pushing out again on her damage. And on the Prime slot, you can really go, it's up to you. I would say I would go again for the Dark Crit because it's going to increase the heal that she gets, and it's going to increase the damage. So I'm really going to be pushing towards a damage build with the Dark Unit Fontus Tissue Sample. If you do not have Fontus Tissue Sample, this build will not work because you've completely abandoned Reflex for the option of not being counterattack. Just for those who don't know what a Fontus Tissue Sample will look like, counterattack resistant 40% from a single stone. And you can have some really nice passives. In my case, I have 100 dribble and other stuff. But this is a stone that on top of it is an old one and seems to pop pretty often when you're combining Dark Uniques. So I would say that is, in my eyes, the perfect build. Now, in what teams would I use her and what would I want back when I'm actually using her? Because I know that's something that people are going to say. So when I'm looking at her, I'm going to say one unit that would really benefit from her skills is if you have in your backline something like a Curl, if you have a Kiki, if you have a Magnus. She does not make sense if you are running a Miho because Miho is going to be able to heal. She just has better passive. So no Miho in your backline, you'd use her. You have a Miho. Miho is a better healer. She's an active healer. She's still spirit. It's basically a version of Miho that's going to be giving life a little bit of a different way. So it's up to you. Now, on the team, I would really push her more on the Mono Wormwind backline. The rest of the team can be what you want. Of course, having, I think it's called Nazarel, the one with the Mono Wormwind buff skill, would also help her a lot. But she really is going to shine in a Mono Wormwind backline. You can throw some dark elements, but there are not that many good dark backline elements. And again, the only good ones is basically Avaron and a few healers who don't make sense. When you are using her, one of the reasons I'm pushing a Wormwind backline is she has a bunch of chains. Pretty good, but the problem is the type of affection they're at. So here we have actually Sammy and Guinevere. I'm going to say Guinevere is pretty useless unless you're facing Mono Thunder, and Sammy's actually a very common center mid to counter Metatron, so this is a pretty decent rival chain. But again, rival chains give her crit and reflex, who's not something that is going to be so useful. I mean, reflex and speed. Now, on a Nemesis chain, she basically has Wormwind players. She has who are these guys again? Limily. She has Swimsuit Kyoya. She has Chain Samir. So they're not that bad. And in Dark, she's gonna have Alkaid, who you're never gonna meet, and she has Lucid, who's basically after Vito's the second best Dark striker. Now what's really nice is actually this affection chain, because in it you're going to have some useless players such as Nari or Blue Dragon, but you have Black Tortoise, who's the second best Wormwind defender and the only non-legendary one, so your chances of having her are pretty nice. So that's why I was insisting on a Wormwind backline. Now, on a skin level, she doesn't have any special skins. She has basic skins. And since currently there are very little players that don't have EEs, the chances of her getting an EE is very soon. And she might be buffed in a cooler way. But currently, I would not advise her on a backline. I would really more push towards something like Magnus, Silk, Miho, something in those C plus an extra Wormwind Defender, and that usually would be better. But again, it's up to you, and if you want to use her, this is how I would build her. And if you have any questions or opinion, write a comment in the description. Again, this is my personal take on the player. I've never actually used her, and I don't even own her. Have a good day, guys.